Good morning and welcome back, everyone. I'm Alexander Lim, and this is Author Story, where we speak to a different author on a particular topic of interest each episode. And on today's episode is Michael C. LeMay, the author of U.S. Immigration Policy, Ethnicity, and Religion in American History. And you can check it out right now by clicking on the Amazon link in the video description below. As for Michael himself, he is Professor Emeritus of Political Science, California State University San Bernardino, where he served in several positions. He has taught for 35 years in several institutions of higher learning in Japan and in the United States. Is published in is published in several scholarly journals and has written over 20 books, of which U.S. immigration policy is his latest. So, Michael, welcome. It's great to have you with us in Author Story.
Thank you, Alex. It's great to be here.
Cool. So, Michael, first off, what made you decide to write U.S. immigration policy?
Well, it's a combination of kind of two things.
Hmm.
I have a family history of immigrants. My grandparents on both my mother and father's side were immigrants. On my father's from French-speaking Canada, both grandfather and grandmother, and then on my mother's side, they're from northern Germany. So I was kind of interested in immigration from young on.
Right.
But then when I was teaching, I taught a course called Minority Group Politics and noticed how the interest of students really peaked up when we got to the immigration as a source of minority status. And so I started to do more research and writing. My first book on the subject was in 1985. And I've written, as I said, about a dozen books on this topic.
Right.
It's got a lot of human interest, I think.
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, immigration. This is essentially a human story.
Yes, it is. And our country, it's so integral to our country's history. And then I was interested in ethnicity and religion. I've got a book on religious freedom in America as well. And so that I tied them all together into this book.
Right. Okay. So immigration in the I don't know how to put it, legislation, immigration in the United States. It covers there are seven, I think, main phases or eras of different immigration methods. Can you just go over these, just so we know what we're talking about?
Okay. So the first era I call, and I coined the terms for them
Okay.
because immigration policy is sort of a gatekeeping function. It suggested to me the door image. So I have a door image for each era. So from 1820 to 1880, we had very little restriction. I call it the open door era because people could just come. From 1880 to 1920, I call it the door ajar era. So we're beginning to pass some restrictions or beginning to close the door a little bit, but it's still primarily open. Then from 1920 to 1965, you have what I call the pet door era, like the little doggy door.
Okay. Okay.
We block most immigrants coming in, except our favored few. In this case, would be immigrants from Northwestern Europe, and the rest are highly restricted with quotas.
All right.
That's the quota era. Then I call the Dutch door era. If the listeners don't kind of know, a Dutch door is one that's sort of divided in half, and you can close the lower part of the door and have a pass through or go through the upper part of the door. And that imagery suggests the immigration policy at that time when we let in people like the Hungarian refugee fighters or persons fleeing communism, but we blocked off a lot of the other immigration. We kept the quotas. And then we go to the revolving door era. This is a period of time when we have a lot of unauthorized, usually people call them illegal immigrants, coming particularly from Mexico and Central America.
Right.
And then the final one is the storm door era, which began in 2001 and continues to today, when we're highly restrictive because of the fear of international terrorism entering with immigrants or diseases entering with immigrants.
Right. Right. Okay. So it seems to me then that the legislation, the eras, are becoming increasingly I know, for lack of a better word, restrictive when it comes to immigrants and immigration.
Yes. Well, we used to, as the poem from Emma Lazarus inscribed at the foot of the Statue of Liberty
Mm,
said, send me your poor, your temple-tossed, yearning to be free.
right.
And we really no longer say, send those to me. We try to restrict who we send, who
Right.
is sent to us.
Right. Okay. Okay. So, you've been looking into this. I mean, this is has been a lifetime quest, a lifetime topic for you. And I know I'm not sure if you can ask this question, but this I think has to be asked. Why allow immigration at all? Like, can a country like the United States, can it exist without immigration?
Oh, certainly it can exist,
Hmm.
but I think we benefit in the long run. Lots of people ask that question, incidentally, and there is a considerable controversy whether immigrants are a net benefit or a net cost to the United States.
Right.
I happen to conclude that they are a net benefit. They bring all kinds of new blood and talent, and yes, they're entering at times upsets the existing sort of apple cart in terms of jobs and occupations and who's working where and what pay wages, et cetera,
Right.
pay scales. But in the long run, those problems work their way out,
Hmm.
and we benefit a lot from that increased talent. So we could get along without immigrants,
Hmm.
but it would be a poorer nation as a result.
Okay, I got that. I asked because I mean you taught in Japan for a short time, and so I'm sure you might be aware of how Japanese immigration works, and their policy is very restrictive, but they seem to be doing well. I mean, they're the third most powerful economy in the world right now. Uh,
Yes.
so is this, is this does this have anything to do with their restrictive immigration?
Well, I don't think how good their economy is doing is because of restricted immigration,
Okay.
but they do have sort of a racial homogeneity concern in their
Mm,
culture, um, and they are very strict about immigration. You can go there and work and stuff. I was there for 2.5 years teaching,
right.
but it's difficult to move there permanently.
Hmm. Okay, all right. So, okay, I guess this kind of attitude is kind of like the driving force behind, keeping people out, keeping potential immigrants out, isn't it?
Yes, it's kind of a racial or what I call a national identity
Hmm.
element.
Right,
Who are we as a people? How do
right,
we view ourselves?
right.
And a Miss America is a good image. For many, many years, the typical Miss America was tall, white, statuesque, blonde, from Texas, kind of thing, or Southern. And
Okay.
more recently, it's a Latina or at least a mixed race, partially African American, partially white kind of person who is the um, Miss America of late. That's because we, as a culture, as a society, are browning, is the term that they often use. We're
Mm,
becoming much more heterogeneous or mixed in our demographics.
okay, okay, I got that. So, let me go briefly over into the other side of the wall, so to speak. Based on your research, what usually goes on in those countries whose people decide to immigrate to the United States? Is there some sort of like an economic depression or religious persecution that goes on that makes them decide to go somewhere else?
Alex, you hit it right on the nail right on the head. There
Okay.
is there we refer to those in the social sciences as push factors. What
Hmm.
push people out of their country of origin, their native country,
Hmm.
and it's usually economics,
Hmm.
often a failed economy, a depression, recession.
Hmm.
It can also be religious persecution. That's been a highly motivating factor for many, many years.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's natural disasters, huge earthquakes, floods, and that kind of thing, or outbreaks of pandemic diseases that just kill off a lot, or kill off plants rather than people necessarily. The Irish famine years, for instance, from 1848 to 1852, a million and a quarter to 1.5 million immigrants from Ireland came during those 5 years to the United States. Well, they were fleeing or escaping just abject starvation because of the failure of the potato crop.
Okay, so really, it's all right. Push factors, push factors. Okay, it's sorry, it's the first I heard of that. So push factors, interesting. Okay,
Yeah, and if I can say, Alex, the flip side of that
right.
is we refer to as the pull factor. So once immigrants decide they're going to leave their country of origin, where do they go? Well, it's often a country like the United States, which is the largest receiving country of immigrants in the entire world. If they're fleeing religious persecution, like the Jews fleeing the pogroms or pogroms in Russia and Poland, etc., they come to the United States because we have religious freedom. If they're fleeing abject, dire poverty, like in Mexico or Central America, they come to the United States because we're a first world economy and they can find jobs. Very often they come for greater economic opportunity. So nurses from Ireland or doctors from medical doctors from the Philippines come to the United States in great number because they can get like 4 times the salary in the United States doing the same thing they were doing in Ireland or in the Philippines.
All right.
So it's a combination of push and pull that drop the immigration flow.
All right. Okay. So let me ask a little bit about you. I mean, you mentioned this earlier about what I would call the pushback against immigrants. It's uh, for lack of a better word, and correct me if I'm wrong, it occurs to me as a mindset kind of like keep the barbarians out. If someone comes in, it might upset the social balance, social structure, and that sort of thing. Is this
Yes, and unquestionably, it does upset it, and that's upsetting to people, particularly if they feel they're in a somewhat precarious position, that they feel more threatened from immigrants coming in. They don't necessarily look upon them as barbarians as such, but simply as the other, somebody, a people other than us. And right now, that's particularly the case for Muslims,
all right?
and it's particularly the case for Mexicans and Central Americans. I mean, those are the two big groups sending immigrants that the country is most anxious about and tends to be most restrictive about.
Okay. And just for the record, based on your research, is there any justification for these concerns?
Well, yes, there's some justification because
Okay.
whenever you have a large wave of people coming in, that has a social and cultural and economic impact. And it takes a while for the receiving country to adjust to those new pressures or new forces in their culture and society and economy. But you give a generation or 10 years, let's say, and usually those things work themselves out. But then often another group comes in and it starts the concerns all over again.
Okay. All right. And okay. All right. Got that. So there is some reason for concern then, but not maybe like totally like, oh my God, they're gonna wreck things and stuff like that.
Yeah, we your readers may or listeners may know the word xenophobia or
Mm-hmm.
xenophobia,
All right.
which is fear. It's an exaggerated fear of the foreign or of the
Mm,
strange. Um, it's in a certain sense it might be it might be justified to have concerns about how many immigrants we're going to receive.
all right.
But to let that push your fears to the point when you would say, let's stop all immigrants or
Mm-hmm.
let's ban all Muslims.
Mm-hmm.
That's a fear beyond what's reasonable.
All right. Okay. Okay. I got that. So with regards to immigrants, you did mention that there are like pros and cons. to immigrants coming in? You did mention like there might be some concerns with expenses and stuff like that, but you also mentioned that there are also benefits. Based on your research, what sort of pros and cons have taken place historically speaking with regards to immigrants?
Well, probably the first con, well, it's for some people it's a pro, and for
Okay.
others in our economy it's a con, but it's the effect on the economy.
Hmm.
So in the early years, big businesses, farm groups, and others, they wanted immigrants
Hmm.
very, very much because they needed the workers. And
Hmm.
labor creates wealth, and so wealth was created by the immigrants coming in.
Hmm.
In later years, or where they may be coming from. So, for
Hmm.
instance, in the 1970s, huge numbers of Mexican immigrants were coming
Hmm.
and they were working in farm labor, and then they moved into the cities and started to spread to various cities,
Hmm.
taking jobs in restaurants and driving taxis and working in as maids in hotels, etc.
Right.
And that created some concern and was considered a con by the people who otherwise were in our economy, that they were these newcomers were the most threatening too. So if
Hmm.
you were already a blue collar, lower skilled worker, and
Right.
now the Mexicans come in, oh, they're taking my jobs.
Right. Right.
That's the kind of fear.
Okay. And the pros?
The pros would be we get things like uh, Musk, or yeah, the creator of Telsa, the
Okay.
corporation. We get all kinds of um, very entrepreneurial persons who start businesses, run businesses, create a lot of other jobs. You get a
Hmm.
ripple effect from those jobs.
Hmm.
Just think of all the Koreans who came over in the 50s and 60s and were running all these little electronic appliance kinds of stores, for
Right.
instance. They have a big boom on our economy.
Hmm.
And for every job they are occupying, they create, in essence, wealth that creates 3 to 4 other jobs. So
Hmm.
the long-term effect is beneficial, but it can be upsetting to somebody who's in close competition with them.
Right, right. Okay. So this is also a matter of not just beliefs, but also economics then. I mean, let's face it, people live on their wallets. So someone whose paycheck will be affected is going to be really concerned about this.
Yes, and understandably so.
Yeah. I mean, yeah. Okay, so excuse me. So with regards to what's going on right now in with regards to immigration, this, I'm thinking about the border wall. I mean, is this something that can seriously uh, support the present trend, the present stance where immigration is concerned?
Not at all.
Mhm.
It's, in my opinion, the wall is an absolutely silly um, policy alternative to face a problem. Um, Imagine you got a swarm of mosquitoes coming in and you get a few mosquito bites, and as a result of that, you take out an elephant gun and shoot into the storm of mosquitoes.
Ouch.
That's what, yes, that's what I think in terms of a policy option, trying to build a wall to keep people out. I give lectures on board cruise ships, and I was lecturing at one, and a person came up afterwards and said, he was joking, of course, but he said, "Oh, the wall will work. Look at the Great Wall of China. Not
Hmm.
a single Mexican has ever crossed the Great Wall of China."
Okay.
And I think that illustrates my policy position on the wall. I think we can do more to have control on the border,
Hmm.
but building a wall to the tune of tens of billions of dollars is just absolutely silly,
Right.
and unnecessary, really.
Hmm.
We could have guest worker programs that would regulate the flow coming in,
Hmm.
allow the people who want to come here desperately, that are now crossing the border in very dangerous conditions often.
Hmm.
Um, we could let them come in a regulated way as
Hmm.
guest workers.
Hmm.
We've done that in the past. We could do it again.
Hmm. And so, what other methods would you? I mean, this is all kind of theoretical, but I mean, this is immigration we're talking about. So, in your opinion, what other methods might be used to control immigration, in such a way that the threats are minimized?
Well, one is to allow people to come through at stations or points and where you can inspect them
Hmm.
for health, and you can, like refugees, you can have vetting to make sure that those refugees are safe to let in, to allow to enter our country,
Hmm.
that they're not going to be terrorists in disguise.
All right.
Um, and then there's the electronic kind of surveillance along the borders
Mm-hmm.
using drones and other electronic devices, for instance.
Hmm.
Um, so there are other ways. Probably the most effective way to control total numbers is, very unpopular, however, would be foreign policy to benefit the economy of those nearby countries that are sending so many,
Hmm.
Central America and Mexico. If
Hmm.
their economy improved, those people would stay home because they'd have jobs in Mexico or in El Salvador or in
Hmm.
Honduras. But they come to the United States because they don't have work to adequately support their families in their home country. That's a failed economy.
Right.
And so they come to the United States instead.
Okay. Well, that's definitely thinking outside the box. I mean, that that already goes into foreign policy. It's not just an immigration concern, it becomes a foreign policy concern.
Yes, and foreign policy and immigration policy have always been intertwined, that one affects the other,
Hmm.
and have since our country was founded.
Oh, okay. Well, other than that, can you give a historical example of the intertwining between immigration and foreign policy?
Oh, sure. We negotiated a treaty in the 1850s called the Burlingame Treaty
Mm-hmm.
with China.
Hmm.
And then in 1882, we passed the Chinese Exclusion Act.
Hmm.
Even though our treaty had said we will not exclude Chinese, we passed a law. They were restricted, not.
Hmm.
We didn't use the word exclude
Hmm.
in the law itself, but in fact, that's what it was.
Hmm.
And we had just a dramatic drop off from, thousands of Chinese laborers coming in every year to just literally dozens, like
Hmm.
60 people or so,
Hmm.
instead of 10,000.
All
I
right.
mean, just a real drop off, precipitous stop of immigrants. And we've done different things like that in the past.
Hmm.
Sometimes it's been through treaty negotiations like the Gentleman's Agreement, which Theodore Roosevelt negotiated with Japan.
Hmm.
And so rather than our passing a law saying Chinese can't come, or
Hmm.
Japanese can't come to the United States, we economically pressured through treaty Japan to restrict who they allowed to leave to come to the United States. So they controlled emigration, the leaving from their country, rather
Hmm.
than our trying to control the immigration.
Hmm. Okay. Okay. Interesting. So it really goes back centuries in this intertwining.
Yes, and think of all the soldiers, immigrants who fought in virtually every war,
Hmm.
Civil War, Spanish-American War, World War I, World War II. We've had thousands and thousands and thousands of immigrants, native-born, foreign-born persons who were of military age, who
Hmm.
volunteered to serve in the military,
Hmm.
often sped up their getting citizenship, incidentally,
Hmm.
and they served with great distinction.
Hmm.
Uh, Mentioned the Japanese Americans in World War II. We incarcerated, but then we let many of them out to serve in the 442nd Brigade
Hmm.
in Europe. And it was the most medal awarded unit in the entire U.S. Army in World War II. They fought with tremendous bravery and at huge numbers of sacrifice.
Oh, okay.
So it's been connected with our foreign policy and our national security policy,
Hmm.
really certainly from the Civil War, and I would argue all the way back to the American Revolutionary War.
Right, right. Okay. So this is really a holistic approach then. In your opinion, is this being looked at holistically right now by the American government?
No,
Hmm.
uh, very simply no, it's in part because the Trump administration has come in with the fear of Muslims and the fear of Mexican impact as one of the main campaign issues. And so they've focused so narrowly on that that they have not kind of understood immigration in a broader context and certainly in a long-term historical context. Right. My book argues in essence that to really understand immigration policy, immigration law, you have to grasp it or study it, understand it in a long-term, couple hundred years perspective rather than the short term, rather than a 5 or 10 year perspective.
Right. Okay. So let me touch a little bit on a topic or a policy that's presently ongoing. Like, I understand that the government is limiting immigration status for those who are legally in the United States. I'm just curious, has something like this ever been done before?
Not really. Not the way the Trump administration is, or the current administration is trying to implement it. He wants to shift it, but we've had restrictions on availability, things that were available to even illegal immigrants in the past. 1996, we had a lot of restrictions on unauthorized or illegal immigrants that also covered legal immigrants in terms of health and welfare benefits, for instance.
Okay. So, all right. So it's not done, say, to the what's being done right now, what's being proposed right now is not to the extent that it was in the past, even though this had been done in the past before.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's exaggerating a policy emphasis that we've had in the past, but it's just doing that to a greater degree.
Okay. So I want to touch on another topic because just how difficult or how easy is it for an immigrant to get into the United States right now? Because from all that seems to be going on here, it seems that it seems the present administration is making it seem like there are no walls, there are no borders, anyone can just come in.
And that's totally wrong.
Okay.
We have fairly stringent immigration laws and processes and that's called vetting when you screen people, vetting of immigrants, vetting of refugees, vetting of asylum seekers. We do that quite strongly. We still allow a lot of immigrants in, but in comparison with other nations in the world. But it's not an easy thing to come to the United States. And is certainly not an open door. The image I suggest for now is storm door.
Okay.
We're trying to block out what we don't want or what we fear or what we, like you would bad weather with a storm door.
Right. Okay, got that. Okay, so let's say Micheal, you came across someone who's concerned about immigration, believes it may affect him or her either negatively or positively, most likely negatively, otherwise they wouldn't be concerned. And you had only time to tell that person one thing about the nature of immigration. I know it's a big topic, but let's play this game anyway. What would be that one thing you would tell that person?
Okay. Work or labor makes wealth.
Okay.
The greatest source of creation of wealth is labor. Immigrants bring labor, bring a very hard work ethic, take up a greater number of them are in our labor force than the native stock persons are, and they create wealth in the long run.
Okay, I got that. Okay, so Micheal, in the last few minutes of this interview, are there any last words of wisdom you'd like to share to inspire our listeners?
I guess I would like to say that until the last couple years, we, the United States, have benefited by what we in the social sciences refer to as the brain drain. The United States was a huge magnet attracting the most entrepreneurial, often the most innovative and brilliant persons to come to the United States to make a living here. And that is changing now. Those immigrants that might have come here 5 years ago, 10 years ago, are now going to Australia or Canada, Germany, or other countries. And sometimes ones that used to just send immigrants out, like Ireland,
Hmm.
they're no longer leaving; they stay home.
Mm.
Um, so I guess I would say we have to be patient with immigration. It causes um, some tensions in the short run, but in the long run, we benefit by our entire country benefits by immigrants.
Mm. Okay, well, great words right there. Okay, then. So, in closing, the book is U.S. Immigration Policy, Ethnicity, and Religion in American History. The author is our guest, Micheal LeMay, and you can find his book on Amazon. So, Micheal, thank you very much for being on Author Story. It was very insightful. I mean, immigration, it's a big topic right now. Thank you for shedding some light on this.
Thank you, Alex. I enjoyed it and happy to have been a guest.
You're welcome. You're welcome. So, everyone, go ahead and check out U.S. Immigration Policy, Ethnicity, and Religion in American History. And also, please feel free to subscribe to our channel. So, I'll catch you all next time on Author Story Weekly Interviews with another interesting topic and another great author.